Simmering disputes have the world looking more dangerous than at any time since the Cold War. Entering 2022, the world looks more dangerous than it has at any time since the late 1980s. 8 months after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, conflicts of interest in Eastern Europe and the East China Sea have set the table for the first serious great power conflict in decades. Crises in the Middle East, Northeast Asia, and the Himalayas continue to smolder. Here are the 5 most dangerous places where World War III could start, in order of how dangerous they are. Number 1. Ukraine. The most likely flashpoint for a great power war in 2022 lies along the border between Russia and Ukraine. In the early morning hours of February 24, 2022, Russia formally invaded Ukraine after building up hundreds of thousands of troops along its border with Ukraine. 8 months into the war, CIA Director William Burns said that U.S. intelligence estimates that at least 15,000 Russians have died at the hands of Ukrainian forces, who have mostly stopped a Russian army that has been full of bad tactical decisions and low morale. Ukraine has been effective in using drones obtained from Turkey and the U.S. This has significantly impacted Russia's attempt to annex Ukraine. Moscow's long-term problem is that its invasion has further pushed Kyiv toward the west. Ukraine has formally requested to join NATO, which could result in NATO weapons being placed right on the doorstep of Russia. The U.S. has supported Kyiv in several ways without direct intervention. This includes economic sanctions against Russia, the transfer of weapons to Ukraine, and the sharing of real-time intelligence with Ukrainian forces. The use of any of these tools leads to direct confrontation between Moscow and Washington, which could end in direct engagement. Number 2. Taiwan. Over the past year, long-simmering U.S. concern over the Chinese threat to Taiwan has seemed to come to a boil. In the last 10 years, China's military has grown quickly, and it is now a big problem for the U.S. to try to help. At the same time, China's military has never been tested, and an amphibious assault across the Taiwan Strait would be one of the most complicated military operations in history. The potential for miscalculation is immense. Over the past 40 years, the U.S. has kept a careful distance from Taiwan as it built a strong economic relationship with the People's Republic of China. This strategic ambiguity was created so that Taiwan wouldn't have a reason to declare independence and China wouldn't have a reason to invade. Some in Congress have now called for an end to this policy and for more full-throated support of Taiwan's international position. A war could begin in several different ways. China could launch a bolt-from-the-blue attack designed to catch U.S. and Taiwanese forces unawares. On the other hand, tensions in other parts of the relationship between the U.S. and China could make Beijing think that the U.S. might change its position on Taiwan, which could lead to a preemptive attack. China may also calculate that the U.S. is vulnerable as it deals with multiple global issues, including the war in Ukraine, North Korea's recent active militaristic moves against South Korea and Japan, seizing on the U.S. while the global economy is tanking. In any case, it would be hard for either side to keep things from getting worse, and a fight over access to Taiwan could quickly turn into a full-scale war. Number 3. Iran. Any honest look at U.S. policy toward Iran now shows that it was a terrible mistake for then-President Donald Trump to pull out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, also known as the Iran nuclear deal. The U.S. effort to increase military and economic coercion against Iran has failed. Iran has stepped up its work on nuclear weapons, made its missile forces more advanced, and increased its covert activities all over the region. So far, negotiations haven't been able to get things back to the way they were because the U.S. hasn't been able to commit, and Tehran has taken a hard stance. If negotiations fail to bring Iran into some kind of deal, the threat of military action lurks in the background. While the Biden administration doesn't seem excited about the prospect of war, U.S. allies in Riyadh and Jerusalem could try to trigger a confrontation. In the same way, if Iran thinks an attack is going to happen anyway, it could stop it with all the tools it has. Iran doesn't have the support of a great power, but a war in the Middle East could give Russia and China chances elsewhere. Number 4. North Korea. The North Korea front has gone quiet over the last couple of years, as the DPRK has struggled too much with the COVID pandemic to bother making much trouble internationally. Japan, South Korea, and the United States have all been happy to let sleeping dogs lie. Instead of trying to solve what seems to be an intractable problem in Korea, they have focused on bigger international and domestic issues. However, recently, North Korea has been active in launching cruise and ballistic missiles across Japan. Recently, North Korea initiated 26 missile tests of either cruise or ballistic missiles, claiming they were part of a series of simulated procedures intended to demonstrate Pyongyang's readiness to fire tactical nuclear warheads at potential targets in South Korea. Our nuclear combat forces proved again their full preparedness for actual war to bring the enemies under their control, Kim said in a report by the state-run Korean Central News Agency, KCNA. In the past, Pyongyang has used aggressive rhetoric to get the world's attention and force a solution to its problems. Number 5. Himalayas. On February 10, 2021, officers from the Indian and Chinese armies met in the Pangong Lake area of Ladakh as they pulled back from disputed parts of their border. Tensions between China and India have mellowed over the past year, but we should not forget that the border between the two countries has witnessed legal confrontations over the past 2 years. India and China have done a lot to ease tensions along their border, but they still disagree about territory and how it should be used. Both countries have kept building up infrastructure in the area that could help the military move quickly when needed. Neither Beijing nor Delhi seem particularly interested in backing down over control of the remote mountain regions that are in question. But it's not hard to see how old fights could start up again and bring up other problems in their relationship. If China considers renewed tension along the border is part of a larger strategy to encircle it and not just a problem between it and India, it might be more willing to take big risks to solve the problem. World War III in 2022. The COVID pandemic has demanded much of the world's attention over the past 3 years. This hasn't stopped geopolitics in its tracks, but it certainly has redirected the priorities of global leaders. The pandemic isn't over, but it is becoming part of the background noise of international politics, and great powers are recalibrating and reasserting their interests. We shouldn't expect a third world war in 2022, but we should always be aware of the potential for things to get out of hand. Most importantly, we should keep in mind that the above conflicts are linked and affect each other. If war breaks out with Iran, it affects decision-making over the whole world.